Hi, welcome to the Warner College's #Adulting 101 series panel discussion on options for higher education. My name is Megan and I'm a career education specialist in the Student Success Center in Warner. And we have two Warner PhD students joining us to share about their experience pursuing higher education. Before I ask them to introduce themselves, I just want to give you a quick overview of this session. We're going to start with 3 questions that were prepared by the Warner Career Services team, and then we're going to have more of a Q&A style session with questions that all of you submitted on Instagram. So to get started, I'm just going to ask each of our panelists to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your program of study, why you chose to pursue it, and how this fits into your kind of overall career and academic goals. And Kristin, if you want to start, that would be great.
Sure. I'm a second-year PhD student in the graduate degree program of Ecology. My home department is Fish, Wildlife, and Conservation Biology, and I'm working with Dr. Liba Pechar. Let's see, I'm sorry, the first question was like why I chose my program.
Exactly.
Right, okay. So I chose GDPE, the graduate degree program in ecology, because I wanted to come out of grad school with a more general degree in kind of natural resources or environmental science. I also had heard really great things about the program, both from students and from faculty. And I know it's received attention from kind of national rankings for graduate programs in environmental sciences. So I was drawn both to what it seemed like the rigor of the program itself and also the faculty and the students involved in it.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, Veronica, if you want to share.
Yes. My name is Veronica. I am a first-year PhD student in the Human Dimensions of Natural Resources department, but I also recently just finished up my master's in conservation leadership in the same department at CSU, so I can speak to both of those programs. I chose a PhD in Human Dimensions of Natural Resources mostly because I like how interdisciplinary it is. I didn't come from a traditional ecology or environmental science background. I came from a psychology background. And so I thought it was a really cool way to integrate all my interests with ecology, conservation, psychology, sociology, all that kind of stuff. And so I was definitely looking at other programs in other types of fields like social psychology, but I ended up with Human Dimensions of Natural Resources, not only because I had already experienced how great the department is through my master's program, but then also got connected to my advisor there, who I work really well with. So that was my main reason for doing that.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you both for sharing. So kind of diving a little bit deeper into the graduate experience. This is kind of a 2-in-1 question, but what does kind of a day in the life look like for you as a graduate student? And then what are some differences you see in your coursework now in your schedule versus from your undergraduate coursework? And we can just keep the same order, Kristin, if you want to go first.
Okay, sounds good. I would say a day in the life is more consistent in my PhD than it was in my master's. I did get a master's before my PhD, and I actually also got my master's in GDPE. So I would say that in my PhD, I think this is just kind of a factor of my personal experience, having been or getting my master's in GDPE. I fulfilled a lot of the course requirements for the program in my master's, and because I did this sort of continuous registration deal, even though my master's and my PhD work is completely different, I'm able to transfer all of my master's credits and apply them to the PhD. So I would say that probably in a more traditional situation, a student would come in and have to do more coursework than I'll have to do in my PhD. So I would say most of my days are me being able to do my own research. I'm having to balance some coursework in there, but very little compared to what I did in my master's. Whereas with my master's, I would say kind of the first year was much more coursework heavy. So I was doing a lot more of reading and homework assignments and that type of thing. And then latter years were, or later years were me doing my research. Whereas now with my PhD, it's pretty much all me on a computer, working with data and or reading papers, but those are directly relevant to my projects. The difference between my undergrad coursework and grad coursework I've found to be quite substantial. I feel like my undergrad coursework was not entirely memorization based, but certainly a lot more than my graduate program has been. I don't feel like I've had any graduate course where I feel like we're really being tested on what we've memorized. It's a lot more critical thinking and writing based. That's been my experience at least. And I've heard a number of faculty and students say that so long as your GPA is decent, your grades don't really matter in grad school. The idea, I think, being that you've put in a lot of time and effort to get to that point, and so there's just this expectation that you're going to be committed to your courses and your study. So yeah, I'd say it's the main difference to me between undergrad courses and grad courses, or there's a lot more responsibility in the grad courses, but you're having to do what I would call as busy work, more critical thinking and engagement type of work than just memorizing.
Yeah, I totally agree. A lot less huge lecture style classes that I had in undergrad, a lot more small discussion based. I'm only actually in my first semester of my PhD, so my experience is probably a little bit different, but a lot more instances where you're actually teaching in the classes. I've noticed just in the few classes that I've taken in the PhD and also in my master's program, a lot of responsibility on like actually learning it by yourself and then teaching it to your peers. And I also find a greater sense of mutual trust between professors and graduate students. It's more like your colleagues rather than this like, oh, you need to do your homework and I'll give you an A. It's just kind of like, okay, yeah, we're all here. We're all researchers. We're all just trying to understand concepts better and learn more. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. In terms of, did you ask about like day-to-day activity? Yeah. Okay. Day-to-day for my PhD, I've definitely tried, it's a lot more independent work than my master's was, because the master's was a cohort-based program. So we just did a lot of group projects and we were constantly meeting. But I find myself being alone a lot more and just doing a lot of reading. I'm taking 3 classes this semester and I'll be taking 3 again next semester. But then it's kind of more flexible in that the semester after that, I'm going to be doing a huge field experiment. So I won't be taking any classes. It kind of just, I think it varies, and then it'll begin to taper off as I finish up that coursework, and then it'll move more into just my research. But let's see, I have some notes here. What was I? Oh yeah, I try to stay on like a 9-to-5 schedule in terms of how much work it is, but I'm always ending up doing more work when I get home. Like I try to come into the office and make it like this is my job. But I try to carve out time for, working out and meeting with friends. I try not to do any work on Saturdays. So I think it is possible to have some sort of balance, but it is a lot of work and a lot of time.
Okay, so we have one more question from the Career Services team before we move into the questions that were submitted on Instagram. So this one is more general and broad, I think, but Do you have any tips or suggestions for undergraduate students who are interested in pursuing a master's degree or a PhD?
Yeah, I would say that some of the best advice that was given to me was to try to identify as best you can just what you want your job to look like down the road, because that will dictate what level of graduate education you need. And I came out of undergrad and I definitely did not know exactly what I wanted to do, hence starting with a master's before moving to a PhD. So I know that strategy won't work the best for everybody, but I still thought it was really helpful to hear or to have heard someone tell me that, because I could just kind of as early as I could start thinking about what position I wanted to be in down the road, and try to plan my career toward that as best I could. And then also kind of along with that, if you have clarity around what you want to do or what kind of job you want to have, I think taking advantage of kind of informational interview situations is really great. I mean, often professionals are really busy. So you certainly want to be respectful of their time, but I think a lot of people also want to help those who are coming up in the field themselves. So if you're crafting polite and short emails to people who have positions that you're interested in, asking if they might be willing to do an informational interview with you, I think could be really beneficial, because that will give someone's perspective directly on what you want to do, and then you can figure out how you can get the necessary experience or education. And yeah, I'd also say being committed, recognizing that it can take perseverance. I think there are a lot of people who want to go into conservation or natural resource management or any of those types of fields, which is really awesome, because we need all the people and all the great ideas coming from those people to move this field forward. But for that reason, it can be really competitive. So just keeping in mind that while you may not get every opportunity that you shoot for, you will eventually get something. And just to have some patience and, like if you're not getting what you want, then of course look at maybe your credentials, but try not to take it too personally too. Because I know many people who struggle to get that foot in the door, but now they're in some really incredible positions.
Yeah, some tips and advice I would give. I didn't think about pursuing a PhD until the last semester of my senior year in undergrad. So it's not too late if you're just like now realizing like, oh, this might be an option. So I went through a whole slew of different ideas of what I wanted to do. I was originally going to go into a master's in teaching. And then I found this program, my master's program in conservation leadership, and I just applied kind of on a whim. But it really changed the course of my career in a great way. I would be open to different opportunities if you're looking at something that is as interdisciplinary as natural resource management or anything in this field. I would be open to looking at different departments, different fields of study that look at the same issue from a different way. I think I could definitely be in a social psychology PhD program right now. And so if there's not like the exact program that you're finding or the exact advisor with the research that you're looking for in that specific field that you thought, try looking in other fields, because you'd be surprised how many different fields are working on the same the same types of issues. Another thing that I didn't really realize in undergrad was how funding works for PhD and even masters. I thought people were just taking on loans for 5 more years. So that's definitely something to look into when you're looking for a program. I just feel like it's not really spoken about, but it definitely is possible to get funding and not have to take on more loans. And it actually becomes more of like a job than just spending all your money on more education. It doesn't pay that much, but it's something, and it's not putting you in a hole. And as an undergrad, I would say, even if you're not entirely sure about it, maybe try participating in some sort of research, some sort of lab. There are always labs that are looking for undergraduate research assistants to just kind of give some time, and then you can gain experience from that, and you can learn what kind of research you're interested in, if you're even interested in it at all. I definitely jumped around a few labs in undergrad, just kind of like looking for opportunities. And it really helped actually when I applied to the research assistantship in my master's, which has led to me doing my PhD with that same professor. So you never know what opportunities can come your way when you just kind of try things out, even if you feel like you're just entering in numbers at first. And yeah, again, with an advisor, that is another important thing to think about when you're going into a research-based program. I can't really speak to a master's program as much because we had kind of a non-traditional program, but for my PhD, you want to have a good relationship with your advisor. You're going to be working closely with them for a good chunk of time. So I think it was really helpful in my decision to take this PhD position, knowing that I do work well with my advisor. And like, if you don't have the experience to work with them beforehand, try to really feel it out and talk through like their teaching style, their learning style, their advising style, any kind of thing, and make sure that that is a good fit. So yeah, those are my tips and tricks.
That's great. Yeah, thank you both just for sharing a little bit about your kind of background and experience, and then tips and suggestions. I think that's really helpful. So we greatly appreciate that. And now I want to move into our kind of Q&A portion of this discussion. So all of these questions were submitted by students on the Warner Instagram page. And we weren't able to include all of them, but I hope the ones we have here will be helpful and give us some good discussion. And I think with all of these questions, if you want to discuss in the context of master's or PhD or both, that would be great, just whatever you're willing to share and feel would be helpful. So our first question was submitted by Logan Sandman 95, and they asked, how do you pick the right program?
So I'll start. So that was another really useful piece of advice that someone gave me when I was starting to think about grad school. At least I found it to be really helpful. Someone told me that there are 3 general things you should look for in a program: the advisor, the project, and the location. So like the location of the school. And the person who told me this basically said, it's going to be pretty rare that you'll get all 3 of those things to fit with what you want. But if you can get 2 out of the 3 to fit, then you're probably going to be fine. So that was something that I took forward as I started looking into programs. And I tweaked it a bit for myself personally. Just like Veronica said, I wholeheartedly second that your relationship with your advisor is hugely important, and you want to pick someone who you're going to get along well with. So to me, out of those 3 things, advisor, location, and project, I kind of made the advisor the most important for me, and that was the one thing I really wanted to make sure I got right and got a good fit with, because I felt like I could tolerate a location for 2 to 4 or 5 years if I had to. But yeah, the working that long with someone who you don't work well with would be really challenging. And then the project part of it, I see some leniency there too a bit. I think in the master's, when you're only working on something for 2 or 3 years, again, it's going to be probably easier to do that, even if you don't like it as much. Whereas with the PhD, you're really committing your life for 4 to 5 years. So making sure you have that interest, that deep interest in the work, I'd say is really important. So yeah, that's kind of what I use to pick a program. But I also like what Veronica said earlier too, about just being open-minded to how what you're interested in may fit within different programs. I actually wasn't aware of the human dimensions of natural resources department when I looked into CSU, and about a year into being at CSU and I found out about it, I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I had considered this department as, you know, a place to maybe get a graduate degree. So yeah, kind of trying to cast a wide net and maybe not restricting yourself just to ecology programs. For instance, if you know you have these other interests in conservation, is good too. But yeah, I guess to summarize it for me, I would say think about the advisor, the location, and the project, and try and get at least 2 out of those 3 fitting well with you.
Yeah, I totally agree. You summed that up really, really nicely. In terms of the project too, it's not just exactly what you're studying, but a lot of the times if you're getting a funded PhD, it comes along with other things, like whether you're a teaching assistant, whether you're a research assistant, kind of where your income comes from. And so that can be important depending on what kind of career you want to go into. If you don't have any interest in being a TA, then putting in all that work to be a TA is going to be kind of miserable. I really like, even though I see myself as becoming a teacher, there are other ways to become, there are other ways to get teaching experience while being a research assistant. So I'm a research assistant. And I think there's a lot more flexibility in that role for me, because I feel like I'd be very overwhelmed in this semester if I were trying to teach a class and then also do all my own coursework. Whereas my research right now is kind of like up and down. So one week I won't have much to do, and another week I'll have a lot to do, and I can plan around that. But it's just something to keep in mind when thinking about the entire package of your program. It's not just your own research that you're thinking about. It's, okay, this has funding for this role and this specific project that we want you to work on. And also, projects can vary. I was actually brought on through a NSF grant. So that meant that the project that I was working on was pretty much set. It wasn't like I was able to really take it in my own direction. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing. I liked that I had the structure going into my program right away. Like, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to be doing this field experiment, and then there are definitely uncertainties still, but I definitely knew exactly where my research was going. But that's limiting for some people if that direction is not exactly where you want to go. So I know that there are other programs where you're in control of everything you do with your research. But on the other side, it takes a lot to actually come up with that research and figure out exactly what you want to do. So just looking into the program that you're applying to in a deeper way, rather than just, I'm going to study human interaction with wildlife. There's a lot more specific things that you want to think about when choosing the right program.
Yeah, that was a really good question. I think you both really gave a lot of good insight that will hopefully be really helpful for students when they're trying to think about, do I want to apply to a program, and how do I decide? So our next question is from Aaron J. And Veronica, you actually touched on this a little bit already, I think, but they asked, at what point during your undergrad should you start thinking about or applying for a master's or PhD?
Do you want to start, Veronica, since you've kind of spoken to that?
Sure. I mean, I think it's different for every person. I think if it's something you know you want to do from your freshman year of your undergrad, then start looking into different researchers that are doing things in the field that you're interested in, or that specific thing that you would like to study. Start looking into different programs, but I don't think you even need to go through your whole undergrad looking, because there's opportunities to apply after undergrad too. So, and everybody has their own path. In master's and PhD, you see a lot more variability in what stage of life people are in. I feel like it's not as common to just go straight into graduate school. So you'll see a lot of people going into the workforce and then deciding that they want to apply. So there's no specific time.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I really like that question, just for what Veronica just said. I think it totally depends on you. It totally depends on what you're interested in, kind of what you want your career path to look like. I too know very few people who went straight from undergrad into a master's degree. I think I took about 5 years off between undergrad and my master's, just getting field experience. And I found that time to be incredibly valuable. I'm really glad that I waited to go back to school and just work some kind of field technician jobs to better figure out what I wanted to go to grad school for. You, Veronica, I didn't know exactly when I came out of undergrad, and I felt like those field experiences were really important to helping me identify what I felt like I could commit 3 to 5 years of my life to, and then beyond in the career. So yeah, kind of like Veronica said, if you're someone who feels like you know what you want and you feel ready to go immediately into graduate school after undergrad, then I would wholeheartily second what Veronica said about looking into labs that you're interested in and seeing if you can get experience. But if you come out of undergrad and feel like you just still need time to figure it out, you definitely have that time. And I don't think you're any farther behind people who know exactly what they want. So I think just whatever works best for your interests and your path is good and will work out.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that maybe in some ways takes a little bit of pressure off of students who are maybe thinking like, oh my gosh, I have to make all of these decisions right now. But it is such a personal thing that's based on your experience and where you want to go with your career and what you feel you're ready for. And I think you both, thank you for saying that, because I think people need to hear that and know that it's okay. And it really just depends on what you want to do and the stage you're at in your academic and professional career. So our next question is from Thenosis, and I apologize if I mispronounce any of these names, but they asked, how long does it take to complete a PhD program? And I think it's probably different for both of you, but whoever wants to jump in, start with that.
Yeah, I would say in a kind of traditional science realm, which I would say ecology largely falls into, if you're kind of just strictly studying ecology, it's about 4 to 5 years. And I think it's probably now more like 5 years than 4 years. A lot of ecology, I should say that's for the PhD. A lot of ecology PhDs require field work. That's just kind of the nature of the funding, as Veronica has alluded to. A lot of projects that are funding graduate students often have a fieldwork component in ecology, and so I think it's pretty hard to finish an ecology PhD in less than 5 years when you have fieldwork, because you're just dependent on that fieldwork going the way that it's supposed to go, and also often there's multiple years required. So if you come in on a project where you're working with data that's already been collected, that's my case for my PhD. I'm hoping to finish in 3.5 years, but I recognize I may not be able to do that, even though I'm going to try really hard. I'm fully expecting that it may still take 4 or maybe even 4.5, even though I don't have a fieldwork component to my research. And then kind of for the master's, again, like in ecology / maybe more traditional sciences, I would say the average is 2 to 3 years. I found a lot of my cohort in my master's, we all kind of pretty much took 3 years. So it's a little bit on the longer side of what I was told, at least when I was looking at graduate programs.
Yeah, so for my master's, it was actually 18 months. So
nice.
That was
That's
great.
Awesome.
But that is definitely not a traditional program where you're doing your own research. That was cohort based. We were all taking the same courses, and it had like a timeline of 2 semesters and then field work and then presentation, really. So in terms of my PhD, again, I'm still in my first semester. So I'm hoping to be done in around 4 years, but, and that's what my professor, or my advisor has said it should take, but it's kind of up in the air. It just depends on a lot of different factors. And yeah, I have to collect all my data and then analyze it and then write it up and try to publish. So there's a lot of things that go into it that can make it longer than you expect, but around 4 years, I would say, for mine.
Great, yeah, thank you both for sharing. So this next question is from T. Bolke, and it is, how often are you in the field versus inside? And I just want to recognize things are probably different right now than they would normally be with COVID-19, and then yeah, just, I mean, you're in different programs, but if you can speak to that a little bit, either personally or even from colleagues and different experiences that you've seen.
Yeah, that question I feel like is definitely an example of where the program and or the project that you go into is really going to dictate the answer to that question. I did field work during my master's, but for my master's, I was working with birds that breed in the US. And so my field season was only the summer because that was the only time that the birds were here. I mean, if you're studying a different animal that's, you know, around all year long and your research questions are kind of relevant to the annual life cycle of that species, you could certainly be out doing more field work. I feel like, at least in my department in fish and wildlife, most people are doing field work over the summers. But kind of even the time frame of that can vary. For instance, in my master's, I was working with the birds I was studying out in the field for maybe about 2 months over the summer, whereas I know some people who are gone for more like 3 to 4 months over the summer doing field work. Some students who I know who do international field work go and live in the country, like people studying elephants have lived in an African country studying elephants for a year or more. So I guess I feel like it really varies just depending on the project that you're working on, the research questions you're asking, and kind of the support you have to do that work. Again, in my PhD, I'm working with data that's already been collected, so I'm doing no field work right now. I never thought that I wouldn't want to do field work. I always thought that that would be a really important part of graduate work, and it is something that I really enjoy. But there is the other side of the coin where if you're working with pre-existing data for your graduate degree, I think you can tend to get out a little bit faster. And I've been in school for a long time, so I'm ready to move forward in my career. And that was that was something that kind of was a significant factor in deciding to pursue the PhD that I'm getting. So yeah, I would just say it's highly variable, but for my master's, just to give a specific example, I was out for about 2 months straight every day in the field.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say my field work is not probably what most ecologists or anyone would say is field work. I work with surveys and more on the people side. So I did conduct like an in-person survey. So I guess I would count that as field work, where I had to go out and beg people to take my survey at dog parks. But I'm not doing your traditional ecology field work at all. So a lot of it is done, especially right now. Our research project is changing from COVID-19. So I just sent out a survey, a mailing survey. So my field work was all done from my computer. And it might change a little bit because the second part of my field experiment will involve community meetings in terms of getting people to plant native plants. So that could be a kind of time-consuming thing where I'm going to those meetings and analyzing different variables. But yeah, I'd say not a lot of work in the actual field for me because I'm dealing with a lot of human stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, both of your answers, again, just speak to the diversity there is in program options out there. So it really is, like you said, Kristin, a personal decision of how much fieldwork do you want to be doing and whatever makes the most sense for your goals and what you're hoping to learn. So the next 3 questions were all submitted by Religulous. So the first question is, what is the most challenging aspect of being a PhD candidate and what is the best aspect?
That's a great question. I personally feel like the most challenging aspect is the level of independence. Since I went straight from my master's into my PhD and I'm in the same program, albeit with a different advisor, different project, so different research, different department, I remained at the same school, the same program. And so I kind of thought, oh, this will be no problem because I know this space, I know these people. I was not expecting there to be really any transition. And so I was pretty surprised to find that I still had a substantial transition where in my master's, I just felt I felt very responsible for the work I was doing and that I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to learn everything I could and yeah, just be kind of the best, or apply the best part of myself to that work. In the PhD, I feel much more like a colleague with the people that I'm working with versus the professor and student. And Veronica kind of alluded to this just in general, like in graduate coursework. It feels a bit more like this peer-to-peer relationship than teacher-to-student relationship. And I felt that very tangibly in the PhD in a way that I didn't feel with my master's. And that can be sort of scary, just like, I don't know, everything is on you to justify, to defend, to explain, to progress. So I found that to be the most challenging, but I guess it is also sort of the most rewarding, or the best part of it is that in this kind of PhD space is the first time I've really started to feel like a researcher, and like I can own that title. Still very much feels like a work in progress, absolutely, but yeah, it's starting to feel a bit more true. And that's not to say that you couldn't experience that in your master's. I certainly needed some time to build confidence like in the field, but yeah, just that shift of my advisor treating me more like a colleague than a mentee has been really cool and exciting and scary. And all those great things and scary things at the same time. But yeah, also the level of independence, I would say, like just getting to move forward with things in the way that you want and you think is best. I don't feel like there are all that many spaces in school where you have that level of autonomy, and that can be really cool and exciting and fun.
Yeah, I completely agree with Kristin. I was actually thinking of pretty much the same thing when you asked that question of, yeah, it's a lot of pressure and you're kind of on your own to figure things out. It takes a lot of motivation just to just do everything, because nobody's really telling you what to do and you have to figure it out on your own. So yeah, especially coming from my master's program where it was a lot more structured. I had a group of peers to lean on. Now I do have people in my lab, but we're all working on our own different projects, and everyone is just super busy. And so sometimes it feels a little lonely. But at the same time, just as Kristin said, like, this is it. I feel like I'm getting closer and closer to my exact interests, and like, you're able to tailor your coursework and your research together, and you're like, okay, I feel like my whole academic career has been building up to like, okay, I'm finally getting to study the thing I want to study, and combining all those different interests that I thought didn't go together. Now I'm like, okay, well, I can pull this from this, and I'm the expert on it. Like, nobody is telling me that this isn't a thing that you can do. So you can get really creative with it. And the same thing. Yeah, I just agree with all your points. You feel like, okay, I'm actually starting this. I'm a researcher. I can call myself a social scientist or whatever you are. And you just, yeah, you have colleagues. You are a professional in the field now. And that feels good, because before I was just kind of like, I'm a student, I'm just listening to my professors tell me what to do. But yeah, there's a lot more opportunities for you to become the person that is doing the teaching or talking about your research, and people are interested in knowing what you've been studying. So it is a really cool feeling. And especially if you've been in school for a long time and you feel like you haven't been able to learn exactly what you want to, this is the time to do it. And it's really a great feeling.
Yeah, that's so exciting to hear you both kind of talk about how you feel like things are kind of really coming together. I think that's awesome. And I also appreciate you being candid as well about some of the challenges, because that's an important side that people want to hear about as well. So the next question that Religulous had was, do you still have free time and a social life?
That is a very important question. I do, and I think sort of like Veronica said earlier, you have to prioritize it. I think the last year of my master's, I just had my nose so hard on the grindstone to try and finish that I let a lot of my personal life fall by the wayside. And it was a really terrible decision. I mean, everything worked out okay, but I still can look back at that time and think, what was I thinking? Like, I could have done that in a way where I was happier and still productive. So, and I didn't have anyone telling me I had to be working that hard. I mean, I think that is kind of a stereotype. Is there's certainly those labs out there where people have this really crazy, demanding work expectations. And that's, I feel, an important thing to be aware of and consider in a potential advisor, is is trying to get a sense for how much they support having a balance between work and a personal life. But my advisor in my master's was fantastic. He was not putting this pressure on me. It was all me putting it on myself, and just sort of buying into that academic narrative of, if you're not killing yourself, you're not working hard enough. So that's just to say that, yeah, you don't even have to have the pressure around you directly telling you to kill yourself. That it can come from within. But just from that experience and knowing that that wasn't how I wanted to live my life anyway, I've been really intentional about prioritizing free time and social time with my PhD. And thankfully, I'm working with an advisor, again, who really supports that and really models that. And I'm finding that not only am I happier, but I am more productive. And I feel like the quality of my work is better now than it was in my master's, when I was just pushing myself way too hard. So I think, I mean, it's worth prioritizing from a mental health perspective, but I've personally really felt tangible work benefits from it too. So I'm glad someone asked about it, because I think it's really, really important to keep in mind in graduate school.
Yeah. I also have an advisor who is very open to people having a life outside of grad school. I think it is something that people don't think about enough, is that you are first a human. And you need to meet all your needs, and that includes hanging out with your friends and just relaxing sometimes. It's really important to find an advisor who will respect that. Like my advisor, they don't necessarily follow, like, they're a bit of a workaholic, but they're respectful of me not answering on a Saturday or something, like on a Sunday even. Like, they are respectful that, yeah, you can treat this is your job for part of the week, but you also have a life outside of it. I agree with everything that Kristin said, but it is possible to have balance.
Yes.
I've been able to so far. And again, I'm only in my first semester, but I'm hoping to continue that.
Yeah, you both mentioned the importance of having an advisor who, prioritizes having that balance in your life. And so I'm actually going to jump to a question from Emma Ann Riley, which is, how do you pick or find your PhD advisor?
Oh, that's a excellent and big question. Oh man, I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this too, Veronica. I feel like it is so important. It's such an important decision among all the decisions that you make when going to graduate school. I feel like I've heard someone like relate it to picking a spouse, because you're really going to become professionally, not personally, but professionally, like enmeshed with this person. They're going to have a huge influence on your life, and you just really want that relationship to be healthy and supportive. And so I feel like it actually is a really personal decision. I would say, like, of course, identify an advisor who aligns with your academic interests. But then if you are reaching the opportunity where you get to speak with that person, I feel like you really want to know how they view their role mentoring, like how they see themselves being your mentor, understanding what their expectations are for you as a student, kind of explicitly asking about that so that you can judge if you feel like you can meet those expectations or those expectations align with what you want. I feel like kind of listening to your gut and just through the interaction with this person, getting a sense of like, do I feel comfortable? Do I feel like this person would respect my needs, would respect my boundaries? And yeah, just tuning into that gut intuition of, do I feel like I could get along with this person, and that we could sort of grow together through this experience? Because you're certainly going to grow as a person, as a professional through any graduate work, but especially a PhD, I think. And your advisor is going to be there with you and learning from you too, as we've talked about how it's more of a back and forth relationship than a hierarchical one. But I almost just want to say, I mean, obviously you want the interest to align. You want to be interested in what they're interested in, but the personal side of it is really important too. And I actually did quit a graduate program because the relationship I had with my advisor, I didn't feel like it was what I needed it to be. And that was a really challenging experience, and really emphasized to me the importance of feeling like you could have really good rapport and feel safe with and supported by your advisor, and not just that they have the same interests as you. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I totally agree. In terms of even just starting out the process, what I did was just look up papers and research that I was super interested in, and then I looked at the authors, and then I looked at where they were studying. So that was like the first step that I took for finding an advisor. But then I found this opportunity with my master's program. And so I got lucky in that I found this master's program that didn't have an advisor in the traditional sense. So it was kind of a transition, a nice transition into grad school. And then through that program, I found my advisor now. And I was able to work with them for a year. So I don't know if I can necessarily speak to that, like meeting this person maybe for an interview and then follow-up conversations and making the decision based on that, because I was able to work with my advisor for an entire year and publish a paper with them. So I kind of went through the whole process, not the whole process, but a lot of the process in working with a person very closely. Yeah, so I don't know if I can exactly speak to that whole, I don't know, that process, because I feel like I kind of got lucky in that the opportunity landed in my lap, which does not happen a lot. But yeah, I would say a big part of it is that relationship. And if you feel safe and comfortable with that person, because you're going to go through a lot of different stressful times in your PhD program, and you don't want somebody who you feel like you can't say, hey, I'm really stressed out right now. Like, is there any way we could work something out to figure out some way to support me in this right now? I'm only in the first semester. Again, I know I keep mentioning that, but I've already had that experience where I just kind of was too overwhelmed, and I had to sit down and have like a really hard conversation with my advisor, and they were really supportive. And I knew like I had made the right decision then. So definitely feeling like that gut instinct of like, okay, I could feel comfortable having, like, I could feel comfortable breaking down in front of this person, really. So yeah, definitely.
Well, and just building off of that, Veronica, I mean, I think that is, in my mind, almost the ideal way to find an advisor, is like the experience that you had. Obviously, it won't always be possible, but I mean, what better way to be able to determine your fit with somebody than if you've had time working with them, you have this experience of interactions with that person to tell you how the subsequent years of working together may look like. So I would say if you're someone who knows what you're looking for and knows what your interest is, and you're able to get experience working directly for a professor who you want to work with in graduate school, I can't really think of a better way to identify an advisor and learn whether you'd be a good fit. Just as you said, Veronica, obviously that isn't always possible, but I would highly recommend students look out for those types of opportunities, because that, yeah, as I said, I see that as like almost the best way of doing it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I actually, Kristin, I want to follow up with you just a little bit, because I think students may be interested in kind of the mechanics, if you will, of like reaching out to an advisor and kind of what that process is in terms of, you know, if you don't find someone that you're able to work with in a lab setting or doing research, how do you search for and then reach out to, interview with, talk with a potential advisor? Do you have any tips or suggestions for that process?
Yeah, sure. I would say I started out with exactly what Veronica said that her process was of, just thinking about what are my general interests, looking up research papers on that topic, seeing who the authors were of those papers, and then looking up those people's profiles. You know, a lot of them, not all, but a lot are academics. And so just doing kind of the Google search to find that person's website or their site through their affiliated university. I also, when I was looking into grad school, I also applied kind of directly to graduate school announcements. I mean, they sort of came like job announcements, where there were some listservs that I was a part of, and also some job boards that I would look at. So I had kind of this mix of just kind of looking up people based on research papers that aligned with my interest, but then also directly applying for opportunities as they were advertised. And so I actually don't think I had any success really with just reaching out to people. In retrospect, I found that I reached out to some more well-known professors that I didn't realize how well-known they were at the time. And so I'm assuming they were very busy and didn't have funding, and so didn't bother to respond. But yeah, so I mean, I'd say like I had more success when announcements for graduate students, or, you know, for an advisor looking for graduate students was posted, and then applying to that. And yeah, so then obviously I knew the professor and their work, and then that was easy just to look them up a little bit more and hope that they liked my my application and wanted to talk to me.
Yeah, Kristin actually brought up a really good point about listservs and getting on them because of the opportunities. So I don't know if I could give you any specific ones, but if you were looking for opportunities, you can reach out to your professors or anyone in the field. They'll know which listservs that they post on and their colleagues post on. That's how I found my master's program. I was working as a research assistant, and the PhD student that I was working with would send me opportunities because he was on the listserv. And it's a great way to learn about opportunities that you wouldn't learn about by just looking things up, because there's other, like I said, other fields that are posting on it with similar opportunities. So yeah, that was a great idea.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is all very helpful information. So thank you both. Our last question from Instagram was also submitted by Religulous, and they ask, is the experience worth the small amount of pay received? I think we could even make that a broader question that might be hard to answer, but is it worth it? Is a PhD worth it?
I'm for myself personally going to say yes, but I kind of have to say yes because I need it to do what I want to do. I really want to be a research scientist, and in the positions that I want to be in or be qualified to be in, they require a PhD. So from that perspective, it's like, yes, because I don't think I could get to where I want to be without this degree. But yeah, I totally respect and understand the sentiment of that question. It is a really hard thing, and I certainly can't say that there are times that I don't wish I maybe chose something different, but it's just because it's hard. Yeah, I mean, even I feel like in kind of ecology, and I'm specifically interested in wildlife biology, so even more so in wildlife biology, I feel like you at least need a master's these days to get permanent positions. So graduate school, for better or for worse, I feel like really is a requirement in that realm. And yeah, so there's going to be a period of time where you're not going to be making very much money and you're going to be stressed a lot. But I think thinking about it in terms of like you're investing in yourself, I remind myself of that quite a bit, that no, I mean, of course we all wish we were making more money as graduate students, but we're gaining the skills and the knowledge to hopefully live a bit more comfortably once we get that career lined up. And this is the stepping stone to that. So yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely hope it's worth it.
I
believe it's worth it. In terms of the small amount of pay that we get, it is, yeah, it's not that much. And I know that there are graduate students that are suffering more, like the UC system in California. They were striking because they weren't able to live with those, I don't know, high rent and everything that's going on in Santa Cruz. But in my current position, it is livable. And on top of just the pay that you're getting, you are definitely investing in yourself and your future career. And I mean, I'm also getting, if you think about it in money terms, like I'm going to school and not paying for tuition. So I'm getting all of that on top of a livable income. So yeah, I mean, that's in terms of just the money side, but then I do think it is worth it in the long run. For my personal interests, I don't think it's for everyone, definitely. Like, it's not worth it for everyone, I would say. It depends on you. It depends on your motivation. It depends on a lot of different variables. But I've always kind of been a person who has been on this path. So I think it makes sense for me. So yeah.
Yeah, building off of that, that's why I really feel like as best you can, identifying the job that you want to have, like kind of, this was exactly what I was thinking of when I said that, was if you don't need a PhD, then don't get a PhD. Like, only get a PhD if you need it, and you may not know, because I think, Veronica, you said like you weren't quite sure initially, and then you did the master's and then realized that you wanted to make that next step. I kind of similarly wasn't quite sure I wanted a PhD and then realized I needed one. So yeah, it's not a decision you have to make immediately. You have the time to figure out if it is going to be worth it for you. Because like Veronica said, I would not recommend this for everybody. But you know, myself, Veronica, we both really feel like it's what we need to get to where we want to be. And then also to Veronica's points about just being able to live, that's another component of the kind of location part of the three things it was recommended to me that you look for, you know, the advisor, the project, the location. the cost of living is a really important factor, and that is one that I kind of overlooked with the when I was prioritizing places, just because I wasn't looking at the Bay Area, so I didn't really have to think about that. But I'm glad you brought that up, Veronica, because that is a very legitimate issue depending on where you're looking at school. So that's not something I would recommend ignoring, despite me saying like, oh, the advisor maybe should be most important, because that's going to affect your quality of life and stress. So I think that is something important. I'm glad you mentioned that, Veronica, because it certainly can be a hardship. So it's not something to take lightly. But there are a lot of places where I think you can get a graduate degree and be relatively comfortable as a graduate student. So yeah, I just want to build off of those great points. Thanks, Veronica.
Yeah, I actually thought of something else. It's not really related to the question, but something that I thought about when applying to a PhD or master's was the institution that you're at. I was thinking, I was like, oh, my goal is to go to Stanford, blah, 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 blah. And then I was like, do I want to live in Silicon Valley for 5 years? And yeah, the location matters. Like, yeah, it could be like a super top institution, but if you don't like living there, you have to it's not just about school, it's not just about your research, it's about your whole life. So you want to look at it holistically. Really, you want to think about like, where can I actually be happy? So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you both for sharing. I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up because we've gone a little long, but I think it was important because all of this information is so helpful. And so, yeah, I just want to say thank you both for sharing your experiences and your knowledge and your tips, and best of luck as you continue your degrees. I want to say thank you to everyone who submitted a question on Instagram. And if we didn't get to your question, or if you want to learn more about options for higher education, the Warner Career Services team is always here to help. You can check out our website for more info. And then also keep an eye on our Instagram for more hashtag Adulting 101 events and topics coming up in the next few weeks. So thank you both so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And yeah, I'm going to close it out now. So thank you.
Thank you. This was fun.
Bye.
Bye.